Hello, welcome back to another episode of The Shit Take. I'm Stella B, my partner in crime, as always, Arrow for the win. Uh,
How's
this
it
week,
going?
this week we're talking underrated movies. We're gonna give each of us are gonna give our 5 picks for the most underrated movies from our perspective, and hopefully you agree. If you disagree, let us know. But for the most part, that's pretty much what we're doing today. We should have an extra video this week later out, maybe on Thursday or Friday. So we're trying to add other videos as well, not just the long talks. Last week we put out a Venom 2 trailer, so if you haven't got a chance to check that out, please do so. Let us know. If you want us to do more reviews like that, just please again let us know. Give us movies to watch. We'll watch them and let you know what we think.
Yeah, like you said, if you're a fan of the longer format videos, we're more than happy to keep those rolling, and probably will so in the future. But if you like the shorter takes, or you have other suggestions for something that you'd like to see, as always, sound off below, and we'll try our best to accommodate those. But yeah, like Stellaby said, today we're going to be doing in our opinions, our top 5 underrated, horror, thriller, that sort of genre of film, and then just giving a little bit of why we think that, and yeah.
So first up on mine, I have number 5, Pandorum. I know this movie gets a lot of hate. Me personally, I think it's one of those movies that, like, throughout the movie itself, you can feel the constant sense of like claustrophobia. The ship itself is huge, but there's not a lot of space for these people to navigate within the ship itself, and that's just because there's and just spoiler warning for the entire video for sure. That's just because there's beings on the ship itself. They don't know where these beings come from. They're definitely hostile, and the movie does a really good job of explaining how these beings got there. I think it's one of those super underrated movies because of how well it was actually filmed. The plot, or the settings themselves.
Mhm.
They had the feeding trap, where the guy is luring in monsters so he can eat them, because there's not a huge supply of food on the ship itself. The storage lockers, where he's stuck in the actual storage locker where he first hides in the movie. And then they have the storage containers, like actually huge containers that you'd find on like trains or on ships and whatnot. They had all those. The reactor itself, they had the entire reactor as a cool set where they slept down in the bottom. The pod quarters, basically just tons of pods, but they fleshed out the entire sets. It wasn't just like an image of this thing. It was a set for them to actually navigate on.
Yeah, it
Um,
wasn't just like a green screen.
yeah, and I honestly, I mean, I guess I can understand there are parts of the movie that could that can really be poked at for sure when it comes to
Hmm.
like a scientific side of things, but as a movie, like as a standalone movie, Ben Foster fucking delivers. He's an amazing actor. The whole movie is basically just one big Ben Foster, storyline, and the story is really simple. It's super minimalistic. It's, I need to get to the reactor because the ship's failing, and if I don't get there, it's gonna explode, or something's. It's gonna, basically, we're gonna lose life support. People are gonna die. If you haven't watched the movie before, it's essentially Earth is destroyed. They've sent out ships to inhabit a new planet, and they're on the ship. They wake up. They don't know how long it's been, but the previous crew is not there to wake them up. They are just kind of trying to piece it back together. They've been asleep so long, actually, that their memories are failing. They have to keep piecing together like why they're here in the first place, how they got to this point. And originally, it was proposed as a trilogy. And so I know some people think it's incomplete, like the movie itself felt incomplete, but perhaps that's because they never really went into any of the other films. But I know it was proposed as a trilogy, and
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, the horror's not original for sure, but I mean, the way it's done is definitely original. There's fear in the monsters themselves, but the real fear is amplified from the environment, and I think that's where this movie really takes that extra step for me personally. And I have to say this, right? I have to say this because just because Alien exists
Hmm.
doesn't mean we can't have another good sci-fi horror.
Yeah, no,
And
I
so
agree with you there.
I feel like this is one of those movies that gets a lot of hate because it's not Alien or because
Hmm.
it's just its own. It decided to take its own twist. So I mean, it's not a huge cast. It's Ben Foster, two relatively no name or three relatively lower named actors, and of course, not Daniel Craig, Dennis Quaid,
That's great. Yeah.
and he plays like the leader role, and then of course there's Norman Reedus. Norman Reedus is on the cast list, of course. He's in the movie for all of 2 minutes, so
Yeah, of course.
don't be fooled by that one. But
Yeah.
honestly, this is one of those movies I remember watching a long time ago. I watched it again last night in preparation for this, and I still like it. I don't know where the hate comes from.
No, I mean, that's gonna happen though. I think that's part of why these types of movies. And now my number 5 is just gonna be something that I recently saw, and the movie is from like last year, but I think that maybe just a lot of people hadn't heard about it. But it was Freaky, starring Vince Vaughn and Catherine Newton. I saw it recently, and then I watched it with my roommate last night, and it was
It's pretty good.
It's pretty good because it plays off a lot on the whole like urban legend thing. Like it's called Freaky. It's literally like
It's Freaky
Friday the
Friday.
13th. Yes,
Yeah.
Friday the 13th meets Freaky Friday. So there's this urban legend of a serial killer in this town. Like Celebi said, spoiler warning, it's all throughout this video. But there's a serial killer in this town known as the Blissfield Butcher, and literally, apparently, this legend's been going on for years. But honestly, nobody believes that it's existed, even though bodies do appear piled up throughout the film. And there's the very quiet has her own little friend group, meek sort of protagonist. She's a mascot for their football team, and she just happens to be wrong place, wrong time, and this serial killer comes after her. And there's just like there is humor spliced throughout the film. Don't get me wrong, it's definitely a horror comedy. But I laughed so hard in the scene where she's like running across the football field, still in the mascot uniform, because I'm just like, dude, you're not gonna fucking outrun this guy. And it's Vince Vaughn playing the best possible Vince Vaughn. Like they're playing up the fact that he's 6'5", 200 plus pounds. Like the guy is like, he looks like a monster compared to everybody else in this group. This whole movie, like everyone's height is so short compared to him, and he chases her, and he stabs her with this dagger that he stole from another crime scene that he was recently part of. And as soon as he stabs her in the collarbone, a similar wound appears on his body. So he's just like, what the hell? And then the main character's sister happens to be a cop, and she was supposed to pick her up after the football game, so she shows up and scares them off. And the girl goes to sleep hearing these voices, yada yada yada. She wakes up in the killer's body. The killer wakes up in hers. So the killer quickly finds that because now he's a blonde hair schoolgirl, that nobody is going to suspect him of being a murderer, which he takes in stride and begins his own rampage on killing bullies and just all this stuff within the girl's school. That just the characters happen to coincide with characters that were mean to the girl in the first place. So that happens. And while that's happening, the girl's waking up trying to figure out what the hell happened, trying to convince her friends that she's her. And it's just so funny. It's Vince Vaughn literally. The reason I think this movie is so well done is because it's each of the main characters playing two roles. They have to play themselves and themselves in another body. So seeing Vince Vaughn do a cheerleading routine to convince the girl's friends that he's her is probably one of the funniest things I've ever seen. And it's just like they're trying to like beat him up,
or that scene towards like the middle-ish of the movie where he's in the back seat with the love interest, the boy. I love that scene so much, man. Like, props to both actors, because God.
No, they went for it absolutely, and it. Just imagine asking out your crush in somebody else's body, and that person happens to be a murderer that people are aware of, and he's like cupping your face, and she's like, "We should try this later." Like. Even the scene where he's like, trying to convince him, they're like beating him with like spatulas and like spoons, and he's like easily just throwing them out of the way.
Into the fucking fridges and everything.
And then she's talking about it like, oh man, like one of the things that's kind of cool about this whole scenario is that I'm in this really powerful. She says she felt empowered being in like his big strong body. Yeah. And it's just they make no slight of like that. Like Vince Vaughn's literally bursting through doors, throwing people. Like it's insane. But it's kind of weird too because while he's in her body, he's also performing like feats of strength. Like like whenever she fights the woodshop teacher, like she jumps on his back like spider monkey style. She's trying to choke him out, all this stuff, and he's still like tossing her again because she's in a smaller body. But like yeah, even with the whole scene with the chainsaw, like she picks up that chainsaw like it's nobody's business. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's pretty good. We watched that one pretty recently too.
Yeah, it was funny though. Like, don't get me wrong, it's hella cliched, especially towards the end there.
I think it's actually on HBO right now.
They might have actually just added it back there.
Moving on, at number 4, I have a movie that I want everyone in the world to see this movie. I know the first time I watched it was with you, and I think this movie is going to be. The movie is Knights of Badassedom, and so if you haven't seen this movie, it wouldn't sound like one of those movies that is meant to be taken very seriously. But let me just read you some of the cast real quick. Right, you got Ryan Quanten, who is the sheriff's officer from True Blood, if you remember. Summer Glau from Firefly, Serenity. You've got Peter Dinklage, right? Playing a badass warrior, right? You got Steve Zahn, who's always fucking funny. He plays the wizard of the group itself. And of course, this is like a LARP, like a live action role playing summary or weekend event. So that's what this movie is about. You got Daniel Pudi, is that his name?
Yeah. From a bed from Community.
Yeah, Danny Pudi. He plays a character that's super obsessed with experience points and gaining or getting it up on all the other players.
Mid-maxer.
Exactly. And of course you got Jimmy Simpson, who's the game master, and he, to me personally, I think he steals the whole movie. But everybody else surely does play their part. The movie is about Quanten's character. He is basically, his girlfriend breaks up with him. He goes on a bit of a binge, drinking, smoking, just wants to feel good. Of course, his friends, Peter Dinklage and Steve Zahn's character, are helping him with this, and he eventually passes out. And when he wakes up, they've basically kidnapped him and taken him to their weekend event, live-action role-playing game, right? He's decked out in gear, armor, whatnot. He's got a fake sword. He pops the doors to the van open, and of course it's just a field of live action role players, right? And at this point, right, it's hard to take these movies super serious, even though I'm going to say it, Role Models is one of the funniest movies you'll ever watch.
Yeah.
Like, it's and they find an absolute like perfect blend to where it's not silly, and you can watch that movie and you don't have to feel like you're weird for thinking that's cool, And I think this movie does a really good job of that as well. I mean, not on that level because Role Models was a very high production compared to this. This is a low budget movie. Don't mistake it. It is very low budget. But they play it out very well. And essentially the story of the movie is a guy trying to get over his ex-girlfriend. Steve Zahn plays a character who, through the internet, gets his hands on a book called the Sigillum de Ameth. And it's basically it's a magic book written by a man named John Dee a long time ago, and it's real. It is a real thing. It's just in the movie, of course, it's got powers. But Steve Zahn reads from the book without understanding what he's reading because he thinks it's cool for the character, and he ends up casting a spell which summons a succubus. The succubus takes form of the ex-girlfriend of the main character. So the whole movie is basically there's this succubus in the woods terrorizing a few people here and there, and a secondary storyline of the main party, and of course their paths eventually intertwine. If you haven't seen it, it is very funny, and there are really good elements of horror in it. We were talking about this the other day, like what makes a good horror movie, or what makes a movie a horror movie? Does it have to take precedence? Does the horror have to take precedence? Is that the is that the sole signifier that the genre of this movie is a horror movie, or can it be primarily comedy with horror sprinkled in? And I'm going to have two movies that I talk about today that are basically primarily comedy with horror sprinkled in, and I think it still counts. So that's why I wanted to include this one. If you're a fan of horror, and if you like comedy at all, this one it's a really good watch. It's one of those just kind of pop some popcorn and take a break for a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. I think whenever you can like blend a genre very well and still be entertained, that you found something like worth watching. Otherwise, like if you're watching a horror film, you're really just sitting there waiting for somebody else's head to get chopped off or the next jump scare. And while watching Freaky, that happened to be like a lot of our conversation. We'll be like, he's totally behind her. He's totally behind her. There's another jump scare coming. There's another jump scare coming. And then it happened. And it's funny because, it's either you're watching Vince Vaughn burst through a door, or you're watching, Catherine Newton's character try to do it as it's Vince Vaughn. But, yeah, no, I agree. Like, even primarily something that can be considered a comedy film can have those elements of horror for sure.
Yeah, and one of the things that hits it for me, right, is there's a scene, like there's a part in the movie where the characters begin to realize that there's something real happening, and in the, like an instant, you see the quality of acting. It's on Amazon Prime and it's free on Amazon Prime, so as long as you have Prime, it is there to watch, and I would personally watch it. It's very good.
Yeah, I might watch it again. I enjoyed that movie. It was cool. All right, for my number 4, I'm gonna be talking about the film Odd Thomas. If you haven't seen that, shout out to all your Odd Thomas fans out there if you have an Odd Thomas in your life. Based on the first novel in the Dean Koontz series, starring the always terrific and unfortunately late Anton Yelchin as the titular character. He's a man who has visions of the deceased. He can like see the dead and like pseudo communicate them, and he also sees these things that he calls bodaks, basically like representations of like demonic presences, and they're attracted to violence and carnage, that sort of thing, murder and mayhem. So he'll try his best to like solve murders or like the supernatural, while also dealing with like his own life and his girlfriend, speaking with the police chief, who is somebody who believes him, trusts him. And I just want to say, like, the supporting cast in this movie is like freaking A+, fantastic.
Yeah.
You got Addison Timlin, you got and I'm apologizing if I butcher this name, Gugu Mbatha-Raw. And Willem Dafoe, of course, is fantastic in it. But it's just like, man, like it's a good movie. Like, it's really just him being like forefront and center, and I think Anton Yelchin was always a talented actor, and it's a shame that passed away so early. But yeah, basically he hears from like a coworker, like she had this dream of like basically a massacre that was happening, and like the whole time in the movie he's trying to like put it together, like trying to make sure he's not missing anything, like. And then it ends up happening, like this giant mall shooting's about to happen from like these satanic cultists, and he's able to stop it, but unfortunately not without like a major loss in his own life. And it's just it's crazy, man, like how much like he puts into this movie. Like there's a real emotion, like just him acting.
Oh, he's a fabulous actor.
It's crazy. Like the ending of this movie always makes me tear up, man. Like it's crazy. Like it's just it just seems so real. Like you really believe like this guy is like just dealing with the pain that he does. And it gives you that sort of lesson, like when you have to like learn to like go and move on from like personal trauma, and just how you can move on as a person. But it puts it to that backdrop of like a supernatural like horror movie with that sort of like mystery of like trying to solve a crime. But I mean, I really enjoy it, man. I really enjoyed it. Absolutely. And
I think it's on Netflix. I think it's on Netflix and
Netflix
Hulu?
or Hulu.
Yeah, it's definitely one or the other, but I would watch that one. It's a very good movie.
Yeah.
and it's not. It takes itself serious too. So it's one of
Yeah,
those
and
movies that's like knows it's a little bit goofy. No, it takes itself very seriously.
mhm. Like the comedic moments are basically just due to like the actors. Like
Like the
nobody's ever
like the situation
nobody's
itself.
yeah, like nobody's like, oh man, I hope this ghost doesn't make my waffle flip over. Like no, it's like yeah, like there's real stakes, man. Like you see some pretty like gruesome stuff in that movie.
All right, number 3 for me. Um, it's a little bit like the last one. This one is Broken Lizard's Club Dread. I, I don't know how it's not listed higher whenever you're talking about like some of the better horror movies. Maybe because it's almost it's coming from like some of the better comedic minds of the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah,
They're known,
Broken Lizard.
they're known for Super
Like
Troopers, Beer Fest. Like you're not expecting these guys to come out with a good horror movie, and then of course we have Club Dread. Club Dread is a party island, and the owner of the island himself is Bill Paxton. He plays a super drunk 80s
like washed up.
yeah, washed
Yeah.
up country singer. He came up with Pina Coladaberg, right? It's supposed to be a super.
Yeah.
It's a super, making fun of like Margaritaville and all that. But yeah, Pina Coladaberg. He's got other songs as well, and they're fleshed out songs. Like throughout the whole movie, you're hearing Bill Paxton perform these old country songs, right? These party country songs as Coconut Pete, and that's like the stories about Coconut Pete and the island itself, right? And so at the beginning of the movie, you have the new hires who are entering onto the island. They're coming over with all of the people who are going to be staying on the island for the week, and you're introduced to some of the characters at that point, right? And immediately, right, because it shows each character and each one of them like turns to somebody and says something, and it shows like this, like what the fuck? Why would he do that kind of moment? You know what I mean? Like it zooms in on them because it's trying to show you like, ooh, all of them have a grudge to settle, So yeah, the movie is basically, you're introduced to the killer really early on. There's a slasher on the island himself. He's got a big machete, and he is kind of there's elements about the character that can make you think it's anybody, right? And they do that. I feel like they do that intentionally because he's got dreads. So there's another character that has dreads. So you're thinking, oh, is it this person? There's different elements that you can find within them that make you think that it could be any character. But essentially, the slasher starts taking people out once the staff notices. They immediately switch to, oh shit, something's wrong. Of course, the slasher's telling them, if you tell any of the actual visitors, I'm gonna start killing people far quicker and in more volume, if you will. And so the camp staff is, they're trying to find a way to go about it, right? I don't want to spoil too much because this is one of those movies that I think everybody should watch. But if you haven't seen it, oh my god, it's such a good movie, and it's really funny. Of course, it's going to be funny. It's the same guys that gave us Super Troopers, so what do you expect, right? And Beer Fest, which it's one of the funniest movies you'll ever watch. So there's a really good mix between all the characters. What's up?
I said Penelope.
Yeah, there's a really good mix between the characters. There is a lot of clever writing, even the horror itself. There's gore. There's definitely gore.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, and there's really creepy scenes too, like scenes that would make you even a little uncomfortable. So for like a comedy movie, this one steps over that line for me. I think it's one of those movies that even though it's, I don't know what takes center stage. I think the horror takes center stage.
Yeah, because I wouldn't show this movie to somebody if you're like, oh, it's good for a laugh. It's just like there's definitely that horror factor. Like there are stakes, and the characters realize that in the movie. Yeah. Like they're believably projecting that to you in the audience. So like, well, if something doesn't happen, we are going to die. But then they're like, oh, that's funny. That's pretty hilarious. It's a good way of like breaking the nerves on certain things. But yeah, like it's horror foremost.
It's throughout.
Yeah,
it's good throughout.
It's not a parody of horror. Like it is presenting itself as a horror film. Like it's not satirical. Like it just happens to be funny. All right, so my number 3 is going to be The Collector. It's a film that to me was probably one of the most uncomfortable movies I've ever watched, but it did actually scare me, like beyond the jump scares. Just the whole fucking movie was just so creepy and unsettling. Uh, so it was originally started off as like a prequel to Saw, like supposed to set that up, but it kind of like spiraled into its own thing, pun intended. But so basically, the backdrop is this guy is like working for this family as like a handyman, but he's really like a thief, burglar, that sort of thing. And he's trying to steal something from this family's house. So he goes into the house at night and finds that not only is he not alone in this house, that there's somebody already in there, but this person is like a psychopathic mass murderer. Like there's traps, death traps all over the house. Like it's the doors and like windows are like barbed wire, bear traps, razor blades everywhere. So it's really this guy trying to get out of this freaking house. And as the family is like coming home, they're of course dying off one after another. But he's just like trying his best to like solve these traps with like minimal injury to himself and just get the hell out of there. And eventually the man, the collector, does come in there and just starts torturing the ever-loving crap out of this guy as he's trying to get out. And as other people are showing up, they're trying to call out 911. Cops come, they get killed. And eventually he does manage to free himself from the house, and then he sees the collector going after like the younger daughter of the house, who he was actually like, you know, she was nice, she was friendly to him. So he goes back into the house, trying and saves her. He ends up getting her out of the house, and then yeah, like he tells the cops, you know, more cops come this time, and he's just like, yeah, this guy is there, you know, he was this and this, he did this to the family. And then he's taken off in the ambulance, yada yada yada. And then the collector goes, kills the paramedics, and puts him in a box.
Yeah.
And you know, he's been collected. So towards the end of the movie, you know, he becomes part of the collection or whatever. And a post-credit scene is she like the backdrop of the collector watching, you know, film slides of, you know, the things you've done while you're hearing the box like move, well, because the guy's still alive in it.
Yeah.
And then in the second film, that's when things just get like so overly top, like gruesome. Like there's some murderous stuff that happens in this movie. Like this entire rave just basically gets like ripped to pieces by like a wheat thresher. And the guy's name is Arkin. He ends up getting out of the box, and somebody who was at the party ends up getting kidnapped by the collector. You know, part of his, you know, his next, you know, torture cycle. And the guy's hired by that a girl's father to take like basically like his private security / mercenaries, whatever, to go and find the girl. You know, even the guy's like, you know, she's probably dead by now, blah blah blah. This guy doesn't like to, you know, he likes to kill, he likes to torture. And they're like, well, then why did you survive? He's just like, I got lucky, yada yada yada. But you know, he takes it because he wants the money. He goes, and it's just like this, like, again, it does really toe that line of almost like gratuitous gore / torture porn, but it's just it's creepy and it's unsettling, and it's just like, I don't know, like I like the idea of like the whole death trap situation. That's why I like Saw, but it's just like, man, like there's some freaky stuff in this movie. And they by the end of it all, I'm not trying to give away too much, they do manage to escape. And it looked like the movie ultimately set up a third movie that I don't know if it'll ever get off the ground. I know like back in 2019 they were trying to, but with like COVID and everything like that, they had to shut down production. And then like I think the production company backed out, so I don't know if we'll ever get it. But I mean, more so the first one, if you want to see like the whole like trying to escape from the house sort of thing. The second one I think is better plot wise because it does add a little bit more to the story. But I mean, I enjoyed them, like really, like they're movies that were suggested to me through people who really enjoy the horror genre, and I was honestly surprised by it. And again, like it does toe that line a little bit, but I mean, if you're a fan of Josh Stewart at all, he's a pretty cool actor. I don't think he gets enough recognition for the stuff that he does. But yeah, it was a pretty cool movie.
My number 2 is The Faculty. It came out in the late 90s, 1998, I think it was. And it came out in a time where horror was really goofy, you know?
Hmm.
Like we got the Leprechaun throughout the 90s, we got Wishmaster, like just really goofy horror that was more about like, oh, well now we have CGI, let's show
Yeah.
you something cool, you know?
There was always a gimmick to it.
Yeah, exactly. And the Faculty is, if you haven't seen it, it's basically the invasion of the Body Snatchers. I mean, they push
Hmm.
that throughout the movie themselves, and they don't hide it. Um,
No.
if you haven't seen the movie, the cast is, it's fucking huge, right? Like you got Robert Patrick, Elijah Wood, Josh Hartnett. You have even Jon Stewart's in the movie. You know, and
Yeah.
he plays the scientist like at the school, not scientist, but a science teacher.
A teacher.
Yeah, at the school, and the whole movie is essentially, I'm gonna go ahead and say it's been around for 20 years. You should have seen it by now.
Yeah.
Robert Patrick, he's the first one that gets implanted by this parasite, right?
Parasite. Yeah.
Exactly, and parasite absolutely it thrives in water. So immediately you see him, and the next time you see him, he's guzzling down water. He's standing in the fucking arms crossed, just kind of taking in the water from the football field because they're watering the field. So there's just these obvious things that the main characters, Elijah Wood, Josh Hartnett, they start seeing and they start thinking, oh well, something weird's going on. At the beginning of the movie, Robert Patrick, he enters the school late. They just had a meeting, and the principal is wrapping up with two other teachers, and of course the other teachers aren't getting what they want, so there's tension there, whatever. And then Robert Patrick steps in, makes a weird kind of sexual advance on the principal herself. She denies him because obviously, and then Robert Patrick starts to attack her, right? And she's doesn't know what the fuck's going on, right? Doesn't know what the fuck's going on. As far as she knows, a football coach is attacking her, wanting sex.
Mm.
So she breaks free. She's trying to get out. Of course, she receives a little bit of help from one of the other teachers. On the other side of the door, she's locked in, so she's trying to bust the door open. She finally gets the door open. After she gets outside, the other teacher's been taken over as well. She kills the principal and essentially takes her body. And so this whole movie is essentially, or not the whole movie, but first half of the movie. The first half of this movie is basically the students realizing that something is odd with the faculty, the staff themselves, and so that's where the movie
The
title
faculty.
comes from. Elijah Wood and Jordana Brewster, they're the first two to realize something's wrong. They're hiding in one of the closets in the actual faculty office, or the break room, rather, and they find a dead body, one of the other teachers, right? So they also witness Robert Patrick's character and one of the other teachers attacking Salma Hayek's character, who is the nurse herself. And so, like I said, there's a huge cast in this movie. They spared absolutely no expense whatsoever when it came to names in this movie. So it's not one of those low budget movies.
No, there's a big name cast.
I remember as a kid thinking that there has to be, just kind of keeping an eye on some of the staff sometimes at school, right? Did you ever see one teacher and think, well, there's something going on with that teacher, you know what I mean? Some shit like that. And they really play on that. And I think it's cool. It takes me back to school, man.
It's paranoia getting the best of it. It's even in Men in Black, like freaking Will Smith's like, I knew my science teacher had to be like from Venus or something. It's like Uranus, actually, well, one of the moons. Yeah.
Yeah, all the tropes are there for sure, but it's not in a bad way. It's not in a bad way. There's really clever writing too, like when the history teacher is having the students themselves write out their family history line. That's that right there is the aliens are trying to understand how many people are we working with. They're trying to figure out how many people they need to take over, if you will.
Yeah. And you got to think about the average high school student body. That's a lot of people there. Like, you spread from that, you can conquer a town pretty easily.
Yeah.
And what better way to start than by the teachers?
Yeah. And there's a really one of the scenes that I liked. I don't know why, but one of the scenes that I liked was when all the kids, whenever they just jabbed Jon Stewart's character in the eye, and he dies, right? And they finally realize, holy shit, something real is happening. There are really aliens taking over at the school. They all leave the classroom together, right? And they're all walking through the halls, and the moment they step outside the building itself, outside the front doors of the school, they just kind of take a look around, and you can see like the awkwardness of you being the only ones and knowing that literally everybody else is against you. It's just,
Yes.
they do a really good job of portraying that these characters are alone, and they kind of just have to figure it out themselves.
Yeah, and I think that's why it was so like, this is those groups of social outcasts, if you want to put it that way, like against the world. Like it wasn't like, oh, here's the captain of the football team and he's gonna save us because he knows this guy. Let's all get together and blah blah blah. It's just like, no, like this is what we got. Yeah, freaking Usher's in this movie, guys. Like, come on,
no, it's
man.
a big cast. Like
it's crazy. I just want to point out too, like this is pre Lord of the Rings, so like Elijah Wood, he wasn't like unknown, but like he's the main character in this movie, and he's like the bottom cast. Like he's like low build at like,
man,
like it's crazy the amount of star power that you have in this movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, like this is like one of those. I think it's like a staple. Like if you haven't seen it, like I would go as far to say like out of any of the movies I personally have named, like this is the one that you want to watch. And the reason that I'm pushing that so much is because in my head I was trying to get these top 5 together, and I kept on switching this around because The Faculty is actually my number 2 as well. So we didn't talk about this before. It just happened to be that way, and I was just like, man, like where do I want to put this on the list? Oh my god,
it is such a goddamn good movie.
It really is.
If you haven't seen it, you're missing out on one of the best. Like, don't get me wrong, right? It's like I said, it's got those tropes. It's definitely one of those movies. It's a late '90s movie. You're gonna have Josh Hartnett with a terrible haircut, You're gonna have like the super stereotypical response to a girl being potentially lesbian. You know what I mean? Like, this movie has all of that for sure. But I don't know. For me, it works so well, and they all come together so well.
There's even the too attractive teacher trope in that. You're just like, well, maybe something's gonna happen, but you don't think it's gonna happen, and then something might happen, sort of thing. But like, it's them being forced into a situation that nobody could have predicted. Again, they're working with what they got. One of the guys happens to be like a drug dealer, does his own little experiment thing, figures out a way to like...
He has his own science fucking lab at home for some reason, you know what I mean? But...
and it's,
it works. It works because the whole movie's unbelievable.
And it's like, and again, like, I spoiler warning because it's from the 90s. If you haven't seen it, check it out. But like Stella B said earlier, the aliens, the parasites, alien parasites, they thrive in water. So the thing that they figure out how to kill it with basically is involving dehydrating them, and it worked. Like you said, it just worked. It works so well within the confines of this movie. Like it makes sense. It's not like
it makes sense.
Yeah, like it's good writing. Like it's not like some shit movie that they just like kind of crap to paste together and be like, oh, they'll just carry it this way. Like no, it's cool, and like the ending is just like, all right, like I could believe that.
The ending is like. The ending is my favorite part of the whole movie, right? Because, like, it cuts, right? Cut to black, and then, of course, it brings them in 3 months later. You got Josh Hartnett now plays football. He's running to the sidelines in his football jersey, in his football uniform, right? He's got the pads on and all that. Pulls a cigarette out of his fucking, out of his pants, right? And he starts smoking right there on the sidelines. And... Of course.
Who's watching him?
Yeah, the teacher's watching him just fucking like clapping her way, right? And then of course it cuts to Elijah Wood and Jordana Brewster, right? And they have a thing now, right? The nerd gets the girl, which is all is well. But of course he's got the news now hounding him for a story, Yeah. It's so cliche, but
within the confines of the story, he was part of the newspaper club, like the newspaper team, whatever, but he was just, I think, like a cameraman or something like that, and she was like the head of the newspaper, like she was queen bee of the newspaper team, and she hated him. Like she's just like, oh, get out of my face, sort of thing. So by the end of the movie, like she's just like, okay, this guy saved the fucking day, So she's into him, they're loving it, and like they're hounding him for his story, but the FBI is like, no, nothing happened, blah blah blah. Like everyone knows that something happened here, but the FBI is still trying to deny it. Like it's so crazy.
It's unbelievable, and that's okay. You know what I mean? Like, if
Yeah.
you're watching like 90% of science fiction movies, they're all unbelievable. Not because they
Yeah.
can't happen, but because they haven't happened yet. Like
Mhm.
this is one of those
It's
stories that could very well happen. Who knows?
yeah.
You know?
And that's the thing too. Like they're not putting it in some sort of like, oh, this is the seventh dimension, year 5,000 with spaceships and aliens. Like,
Yeah.
no, this is happening in your own backyard. This is happening in your high school, blah blah blah. And whenever they figure this stuff out, they accept it. They're not
Yeah.
just like, well, no, maybe it's this, maybe that. Like these people, like I said, this is the situation they're in, and they're like, okay, there's aliens involved. Like we're accepting that. Let's figure out how to freaking solve this.
Yeah.
And I think that really sets it apart from a lot of stuff, because you see that so much, and especially like in horror movies, like there's that doubt, like, oh, I saw a table fly when nobody is around and 3 people just got impaled, but I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
I'm gonna spend another night in the creepy hotel.
So my number one, it's not super well known. I think the people who have seen it know exactly how good it is. But I think I put it on here because I want everybody to know about it. It's just such a fantastic movie. It's called Behind the Mask: The Rise of Leslie Vernon. If you haven't seen it, it is the absolute best homage to the horror genre. It is like a super ode to all of the ones that came before and everything that'll come after. And
Yeah.
essentially what it is there is a documentary crew who is trying to follow the story of this character named Leslie Vernon. They're trying to document his preparation and carrying out of his next murder spree, right? So the whole story is they arrive at this farm, right? The movie begins, they arrive at this farm, and immediately all of the cliches, all the stuff that you've seen before, right? The window peeps open, they see the person, right? Oh, look, there he is, and then all of a sudden, one of the twigs breaks over here on the other side of the house, and you're just like, how the fuck did he get there so quick, right? And then literally the next scene, he's like, hey, how are y'all doing? That kind of stuff. Essentially, the whole movie is an explanation as to how each slasher in the past
Yes. Yeah.
has gone about their stories.
It literally demystifies the smoke and mirrors, telling you exactly how he's doing it.
He
He's like, oh,
does.
this is yeah.
Yes,
It's
but
great.
he also portrays it in a ritualistic manner. Even Robert Englund is in this movie.
We're fans of Freddy Krueger.
Yes.
He's in here.
Who from Walking Dead, Herschel?
Yeah, it's
Right,
Herschel's
Herschel.
in there. Yeah.
The guy, I forget his name. I'm sorry. The actor from Walking Dead, Herschel. He's also in the movie. He plays basically like a trainer, not just a trainer, like a mentor, if you will, to Leslie Vernon. And so the documentary crew is literally just following his steps, how he prepares, how he chooses who his next victim is going to be. And I'm telling
Scott
you,
Wilson.
yeah. If you watch this movie, you're going to see every single horror movie in the genre, everything that came before, everything that comes after, they all follow a very similar path. And they explain it so well, and they do it so well. And of course, the guy who plays Leslie Vernon is such a good actor. He went to Juilliard, he's a serious actor.
Yeah.
He does it so well. There's nothing I can say about this movie that's bad, and there's not enough that I can say about it that's good. You know what I mean? Like it's that good. It really is that good. But if you're a fan of the horror genre, this is one of those movies that you have to see.
Yeah, so it's again, like we I know people are gonna be like, oh, I don't believe you at this point, but we didn't talk about our lists.
You picked it too?
Like beforehand. I didn't pick it, but I picked a movie that is like in that similar vein of just trying to being an homage to the whole thing. But I do love that movie though, and I thank you for showing it to me. But the movie I picked is called The Final Girls, and again, it is like so tongue in cheek with the whole slasher genre in particular.
Yeah.
Just basically setting up like the rules and the homage to like those 80s like camp slasher films. So basically the main character is this girl whose mother starred in a slasher camp film in the 80s, and she's still the actress, but everyone's always constantly bringing up that role to her. She's like, I'm trying to move past it, be a serious actress or whatever. And there's a car accident, the mother dies 3 years later, and the girl's like kind of like a shell of her mother, of her former self. just trying to get through school, that sort of thing. And her friends are like, hey, like you got to start living for yourself. You can live in this, hole. And her best friend's brother happens to be a huge fan of that mother's horror film. Yes, and it's Thomas Middleditch. Dude, again, this is like there's so many funny people in this movie. Like it's really hilarious. Really good cast. So he's like the leader of the fan club, and he's like begging the girl. She's like, can you come just maybe talk a little bit, do a Q&A. She's like, no, I don't want to. It was like the anniversary of the mom's death, so it was really just raw to her. Like she didn't want to, and so she's walking out of there, and he's like, oh well, so and so is going to be there, blah blah. The crush, of course, and she's just like, just maybe, I'm just not. And he's like, what if I, volunteer to do all your homework assignments for the rest of the year? She's like, stops, right? He's like, I know you're failing so and so's class, do it, and I will do every single one of your assignments, please. And she's like, okay, I'll go. So she goes. Teen heartthrob's there. She's getting, blah, blah, blah. They're talking. Then the ex-girlfriend comes in, who's her ex-best friend, but this and that. They had a falling out. Yada, yada, yada. They're watching the movie. She's like, man, my mom really was, like, alive in this role. Really enjoyed seeing her. All this random, fucking Rube Goldberg machine later. The theater's on fire. They're like, exits clogged. They're trying to get out of there. They're freaking out, and they're like, "Oh, is there a exit behind the screen?" And he's like, "Yeah." She takes a prop machete that somebody drops, and she cuts a hole through the theater screen, and they kind of like pile it into what appears to be a door, and they wake up in the middle of this grassy plain, and they're like, What's going on? What happened? Is this a dream? Whatever. And a van literally comes down the road asking them directions to the camp, because these are characters from that movie. And they're like, what the hell's going on? The van drives by. 92 minutes later, the same van, same people in it, asking the same question if they have directions. And they're like, what? And 92 minutes go by again, and they're like, okay, we're in the movie. Like, and again, they're so readily accepting of it, because like all of them have seen the movie. The guy, Thomas Middleditch character, it's like he's seen it 1,000 times, and they're like, well, I guess we just have to like wait till the movie's end. So they're there like passing themselves off as counselors, and she sees her mom's character, and she's just instantly like taken back to that place. She's just like, oh my god, like she starts talking to her, trying to get to know her slowly, like while they're interacting with these campers, and basically letting the movie play out while calling out like, oh, well, this is that trope, and they're like, I guess we just have to let it play out. So they're watching these people get murdered, and then they're like, oh, let me get a picture of this guy, because I'll never get this experience before. And he's like, don't worry, he can't kill us. And he's like, look, see, he doesn't even know what to do with us. And the guy's just kind of like, the killer just kind of like watching him, like not sure what to do. So he gets like a selfie with them, and then eventually just smacks Thomas Middleditch right in the rib cage, and just goes down. And they're like, oh shit, he can kill us. So they start running for it, and it sets up the whole final girl trope. Only the the pure unsoiled virgin girl can take the machete and kill the murderer to end the movie. So they're like, oh, let's just hang out with her. And of course the girl comes in like the Firebird, and she's wearing the leather jacket. She's like all badass, and yeah, then the guy comes and starts murdering people, and then she like freaks out. And dude, Adam Devine's in here, and he's just so freaking ridiculous. He's just like so the cocky pretend. He is the cocky like jock, like, oh, camp counselor that wants to bang everybody. And so he escapes with her, and that girl's like his fiance in real life. So I thought that was really funny. And they end up like trying to like haul ass out of the camp. Nobody can escape. They keep on going around in circles. And Thomas Middleditch's character comes out like he wasn't dead. He's just like, guys, I'm alright, blah, blah, blah. And they just, boom, run him over, and they just crash and die. So they're like, oh shit, what do we do now? And they're like, well, we need a new final girl, blah, blah, blah. And now, by this point, because she was talking to her mother's character so much, the mom's character is still a virgin within the confines of the film. So they're like, oh, I'll be the new final girl, whatever. They set up this like absorbent plan to sort of like kill off the guy and all this stuff, and just it of course runs awry. And just it's so crazy, that movie. And Yada yada yada. Not to spoil too much, but it ends on such a funny tone that could easily set up a sequel. Whether or not that'll happen, I don't know. But like it like even cast wise, man. Like just running down the cast list, it's Tausa Farmiga,
Yeah.
Malin Ackerman, Alexander Ludwig, Ina Dobrev, Ella Shawkat from Arrested Development, Thomas Middleditch, Adam Devine, Angela Timber, Chloe Bridges. Like it's just a funny movie, but like it's like again like they're really like whenever they realize like, oh crap, we can die in this, like it becomes like that flip switch is like, oh shit, now we have to like really be scared of this crap. But it's just such a goofy homage to just slasher films and just the whole camp. It's always like these camp movies that are just like worse. There's curse and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So the first honorable mention I had was it was a goofy film, but it took the supernatural horror part of it very seriously. Everything else in this movie is not serious at all. I'll tell you that much. It's called Suburban Gothic. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's starring Matthew Gray Grubler. Kat Dennings is in the movie, and Kat Dennings just I'm not trying to upset anybody or offend anybody, but I feel like Kat Dennings just appears on these like film sets, and they're just like, fucking go with it, man. She is 100% her own person in this movie. She's just doing whatever she wants. Like even the parts where like she's supposed to be really scared, she has almost this feigned ignorance, and I think that's why I didn't count it amongst my actual top 5, because like I feel like she didn't want to be there at all, and she was supposed to like portray like the badass like bartender, leather jacket, just like, oh, let me just take this crowbar everywhere I go and not know how to use it. But I mean, there's like there's such an unnecessary like romantic push between their two characters that just it's so weird. Like she's even like, oh, I don't want to sleep with you, and he's just like, oh, okay, I don't want to sleep with you either. She's like, okay, good, and they're like, all right. And there's even a point where they're just like questioning his sexuality in it, and he's just like the whole movie, and then he finally just comes out and says it. He's just like, I'm not gay. Like, oh, I thought you were gay. And he's just like, why? He's like, well, because I'm gay. You just seemed really gay to me. And it's like the guy's cousin who's he's an out gay man, and he's questioning the main character's sexuality. And he's just like, oh, well, I mean, I'm gay. You just look really gay to me. And he's just like, I'm not. And he's just like, huh? Like, just really like perplexed by it. Like, and it's really silly. Like,
could have sworn.
Yeah, and like the language is it's pretty bad. Like, not even in terms of dialogue, just with what people say. So it's definitely not a movie I would suggest if you're not okay with hearing a lot of shit and just about like stuff in general, not even like just about sexuality or anything like that. Like the dad's character is just like as like black and white as it can be.
Yeah.
Like he hates his son. He tells him to his face, he's like, you're a disappointment to me. It's just like, wow, cool, like awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I only have 2 on my honorable mentions. I have
Good.
and this isn't even really like a real honorable mention. I only say it because of the movies in this series, the one that gets the most love is Evil Dead 2, and don't get me wrong, Evil Dead 2 is a really awesome fucking movie.
Yeah.
But Army of Darkness is so fucking good, and I think it's up there with Evil Dead 2. You know what I mean? I think in some ways it's even better. I guess I kind of lean the comedy.
I was gonna make that point. Yeah, Army of Darkness definitely starts blending the comedy a little bit more in there while still being a movie about the undead, the Necronomicon, and all that.
But not just that, dude. Like I'll never forget the first time I saw. Like whenever he gets into the windmill, right, and he's fighting the little baby ashes, he ends up eating one on accident, dives into his mouth, and he pours the boiling water into his mouth to kill it, right? Immediately after, he starts itching, right? He's like, what the fuck? And he's pulling on his shirt, right? And rips his shirt open. There's a fucking eyeball on his shoulder. You know what I mean? An eyeball on his shoulder that looks absolutely fucking filthy. staring, eyes moving around. And I'll never forget, like, that always bugged me as a kid. Like, I always thought, like, holy shit, is that a possibility? Am I gonna grow a fucking eye on my body? You know, it's filthy.
Scratching.
Oh man,
Yeah.
I'll never forget that movie. It was so good.
Gives you that level of, unrealistic, maybe realistic fear, but it makes you uncomfortable enough that you want to up there. Yeah, no, it's pretty bad. But yeah, it's still enjoyable, and it's Bruce Campbell being awesome.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this movie is underrated. I'm just saying compared to Evil Dead 2. That's the reason why I didn't put it on my list, but I just wanted to mention it because I feel like a lot of people kind of bring it down because it's not Evil Dead 2, and it's like, don't get me wrong, Evil Dead 2 is good. But if you're going to sit there and fucking tell me that Army of Darkness is worse than Evil Dead 2, you're out of your fucking mind. Like, that movie is, just because it's silly doesn't mean it's not fucking great horror. Like,
but yeah, no. So the other movie that I really wanted to say was a toss up, but I'm gonna go with Dismissed. Like, it definitely leans more to like the thriller than straight up horror. But the reason I wanted to put up on here was because it's another movie that completely sold me solely on one actor's ability. Like, that was it.
Sprouse.
And it was Sprouse, man. And Dylan Sprouse, not Cole, not Jughead from Riverdale. This is Dylan Sprouse. This was the Zach from Zach and Cody. He had retired to do, other businesses, go to school and all that. This was his first film back since retiring. It was 2017, Dismissed. And he plays the idealistic, straight-laced, wearing a briefcase to school, straight-A student who's just, trying to get an Ivy League school, get his life together, blah, blah, get on his board. But he is just 100% committed to that perfect GPA. And it's just like the plot is so freaking like ridiculous. It really spirals so quickly. Yeah.
Well, my other honorable mention is Hot Fuzz.
Okay.
If you've seen Hot Fuzz,
it might toe the line, but I would consider
it toes the line
it
for
horror.
sure.
Yeah.
It definitely toes the line for sure. But think about it, right? There's a slasher.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not gonna spoil nothing, but there's a slasher. There is gore.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you think about it, right? Like, literally within the first 5 minutes of the movie, right? Because the movie's about a cop, police constable, who is too good at his job.
Yeah.
He's too good at his job. He's making all the other cops look bad. And so, as punishment, they relegate him to a country town in Sanford, Gloucestershire. So they literally relegate him to a small town where it's won Village of the Year several times. It's one of the best places to be. Statistically super low crime rate, no murders. Just they put him there because they don't want him. They don't want him on the streets anymore because he's just doing too much. He's literally how they put it in the movie is he's going to put everybody out of a job. Once he gets there, within the first 5 minutes, he checks in at his hotel, and literally his first words are, hello, and he says something to the effect of, I'd like to check in, right? And the girl behind the counter literally tells him, but you've always been here. It's literally a call out to The Shining. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, the movie is definitely like hardcore action. It is action for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
There's a slasher, and there's gore, and people are getting killed left and fucking right. It toes the line for sure, but I personally consider it a horror movie because it has all those elements. It's definitely a comedy, definitely action, but I'll die on my sword thinking that this movie is always going to be considered a horror movie for me.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you compare it to something like Shaun of the Dead, which is again within the same Cornetto's Three Flavors trilogy, Shaun of the Dead looks more like the horror movie. Of course, it's zombies. It's hard, but it's still balancing with that comedy element. But Hot Fuzz, while like an action comedy, it has that distinct you know, like there's a conspiracy going on, there's a crime, and like nobody's listening to you. Everyone seems to be set in their ways. Like it gives you that creepy undertone that's like, yeah, like there's some real danger happening here. And again, there's a murder going on. Like there is gore, there's explosions, like, and it doesn't have to set itself upon a supernatural slasher.
Exactly.
Like these are people doing this, and I think that's what makes it fucking creepier, because it literally is taking that trope, that paranoia of like, well, what if it was just your next door neighbor? What if it was the old sweet lady down the road? You know, is always guarding her flowers. You know, what if that sod was, you know, human fertilizer? Like, I will stand by that point that it can be considered a horror movie.
And that's why, at the end of this month, on that final Sunday for Halloween, we're actually going to be diving into this movie real heavily. So we won't get too much into it right now.
Yeah.
But this is the movie we're going to get into on Halloween Day, so the 31st. Whenever we put that video out on the last day of the month, which will be Sunday. But that's the movie we dive into is going to be Hot Fuzz, and I'll fucking prove my point.
Yeah, like we're gonna go pretty hard on this. It's a movie that like we're both pretty passionate about. Like it's a damn good one. All right, so you know, hopefully you enjoyed that. But those were our picks for, you know, top 5 underrated horror films, that genre. You know, give our little. Well, we think so. Maybe you agree, maybe you don't. As always, you know, we welcome that dialogue, and feel free to sound off below. You know, maybe some of your picks are most underrated, or if you agree with some of ours, and you know, just others that you might think we enjoy. Go ahead and leave us that there. As always, our social medias are going to be in the description. You can feel free to follow us. You know, we'd love to hear from you guys.
Absolutely. And what we want is eventually we want it to be able to communicate back and forth between, you know, y'all as well. So, you know, like we keep saying, you know, if y'all have any suggestions for us, please let us know, because that's what we want. We want to take those suggestions and put something to them, so we know, so that we can communicate to y'all that y'all know we're listening. And that's what we want to foster. We want to foster that sense of, you know, communication between us and y'all. So please, you know, put it down in the comments below. Join the Discord, post it there, follow us on Twitter or on Facebook. You can do it anywhere you'd like, just do it.
Yeah, absolutely. We want this to, you know, we grow, and I think that's you know, one of the best ways to do so with any growing sort of like, you know, community, fan base, whatever you want to call it, is having that communication, so that, you know, like, oh, I'm not just, you know, one of 50 million comments or something like that. Like, you know, that somebody's actually replying to you, actually saying, hey, you know, that's a good idea, or, oh, you know, why did you think that? You know, kind of like have that back and forth, and that's how you, like, you know, that, yeah, like you're actually communicating with somebody, you know, that's a real person there talking back to you.
So yeah, I'm Stella B.
And I'm Arrow for the win.
And we'll catch you all next time.
All right, y'all take care.